The Galactic Assembly Hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian floors and crystalline walls that caught the light of 7 different suns streaming through massive viewports. Representatives from 412 member species filled the tiered seating arrangements, their various forms creating a tapestry of alien life that would have driven any xenobiologist mad with excitement. Some floated in anti-gravity bubbles filled with methane. Others required specialized pressure suits to survive the standard oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere. A few existed only as projected consciousness patterns, their physical bodies too fragile to travel between stars. At the center of this magnificent gathering stood Commander Vraxos of the Korath Empire, his massive frame casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the light around him. The Korath were impressive creatures by any standard. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies were covered in scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight black, depending on their emotional state. 4 powerful arms emerged from broad shoulders, each ending in hands capable of crushing rock. Their faces, if they could be called that, featured 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows of 3, giving them nearly 360 degrees of vision. But it was not their physical appearance that made the Korath famous throughout the galaxy. It was their reputation as the undisputed masters of Deathworld colonization. Fellow members of the Galactic Assembly, Commander Vraxos began, his voice a deep rumble that resonated through the translation systems embedded in every seat. Today marks the 2000th anniversary of the Korath Expansion Initiative. In these 20 centuries, my people have conquered and colonized more Deathworlds than any species in recorded galactic history. A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the assembled delegates. Even species that had no love for the Korath could not deny their accomplishments. The numbers spoke for themselves. 37 worlds with surface temperatures exceeding 400 degrees. 29 worlds where acid rain falls every single day. 18 worlds with radiation levels that would kill most species within hours. 44 worlds with gravity exceeding 3 times galactic standard. Vraxos paused, letting each statistic sink into the minds of his audience. And not a single failure. Not one colony abandoned. Not one retreat in 2,000 years. High Counselor Matraxis of the Velian Consciousness raised one of her translucent tentacles, requesting permission to speak. As the current chair of the Galactic Assembly, her question carried considerable weight. Commander Vraxos, your species' achievements are indeed remarkable, but surely you acknowledge that other species have also colonized hostile environments. The Granati live in the crushing depths of gas giants. The Morkellians thrive in the cold vacuum of asteroid belts. What makes the Korath truly exceptional? Vraxos's scales shifted to a deep crimson, the Korath equivalent of amused confidence. With respect, High Counselor, the Granati evolved for gas giant environments. The Morkellians were born in the void between worlds. They did not conquer those environments. They simply exist where nature placed them. The Korath are different. He gestured to the massive holographic display behind him, which now showed images of the Korath homeworld. We evolved on Korath Prime, a world of moderate temperature, standard gravity, and breathable atmosphere. A paradise world by any definition. We had no natural reason to develop the traits that make us supreme survivalists. We chose to become what we are. We engineered ourselves, trained ourselves, and pushed ourselves beyond every limitation that nature attempted to impose. The display shifted to show Korath colonists working on a volcanic world, their bodies protected by minimal environmental suits as molten rock flowed around them. We developed genetic modifications that allow us to survive temperature extremes that would boil or freeze any other species. We enhanced our cellular structure to resist radiation. We trained our minds to function under psychological pressures that drive other beings to madness. Another murmur swept through the assembly, this time tinged with something like admiration mixed with unease. The Korath had always made other species uncomfortable. Their relentless pursuit of physical superiority struck many as obsessive, even dangerous. This is why, Vraxos continued, the Korath Empire has been entrusted with the assessment protocol for all newly discovered Deathworlds in the galaxy. When our survey ships identify a hostile planet, we determine whether it can be colonized, by whom, and under what conditions. We are the standard against which all survival capabilities are measured. Ambassador Kellish of the Thermian Collective, a species of small, furry beings known for their diplomatic skills, raised a delicate paw. Commander, the Assembly has received reports of a new species recently discovered in the Outer Rim territories. Initial surveys suggest they may have originated on a Deathworld themselves. Have the Korath conducted any assessment of these beings? The question hung in the air like an unexpected storm cloud. Vraxos's scales flickered through several colors before settling on a neutral gray. You speak of the species calling themselves humans. Yes, we are aware of them. A Korath survey vessel encountered their primitive spacecraft approximately 2 of their planetary rotations ago. And what assessment has been made? The assessment is ongoing, Vraxos replied, his tone carefully controlled. Initial observations suggest a species of limited technological development, confined to a single star system. They have not yet developed faster-than-light travel and rely on chemical propulsion for their spacecraft. Frankly, they are unremarkable in nearly every measurable way. Nearly every way? High Counselor Matraxus pressed. What aspect of this species do you find remarkable, Commander? Vraxos was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Their homeworld, the planet they call Earth. The holographic display flickered and changed, now showing a blue and green sphere hanging in the darkness of space. To most of the assembled delegates, it looked pleasant enough. Oceans of liquid water covered much of the surface. Green and brown land masses suggested vegetation and soil. White clouds drifted across the atmosphere. This world, Vraxos said slowly, presents something of a puzzle. Our initial scan suggested a habitable environment well within normal parameters. However, our analysts have spent the past 2 rotations examining detailed data from human records, and their findings are troubling. He manipulated the display controls, and new information began appearing alongside the planetary image. Surface temperature variations ranging from negative 89 degrees to positive 57 degrees Celsius, depending on location and season. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Such temperature extremes were unusual on any single world. Atmospheric oxygen content at 21%, well above the combustion threshold. This world literally has an atmosphere that supports and encourages fire. The humans not only survive alongside this constant threat, they have deliberately harnessed fire for hundreds of thousands of years. The display continued updating. Seismic activity resulting in what humans call earthquakes occurs constantly across the planet's surface. Massive volcanic eruptions reshape entire regions without warning. The planet's magnetic field weakens periodically, exposing the surface to increased radiation from their star. Vraxos's scales had shifted to a pale yellow, a color associated with Korath confusion and uncertainty. The oceans contain predators of enormous size and aggression. The land hosts creatures venomous enough to kill with a single bite. The very plants produce poisons capable of stopping a heart within minutes. And perhaps most disturbing of all, he paused, ensuring he had the complete attention of every delegate. The humans do not hide from these dangers. They do not build sealed environments to protect themselves from their world. They go outside. They swim in those predator-filled oceans for recreation. They climb mountains that could kill them in dozens of different ways simply because the mountains exist. They keep some of those venomous creatures as pets. A collective intake of breath swept through the assembly. Even the Korath, masters of Deathworld colonization, maintained heavily protected settlements on hostile worlds. The idea of a species simply living exposed to such dangers was almost incomprehensible. But surely, interjected Representative Golmack of the Fortress Worlds, these humans must have extremely short lifespans. No species could survive such constant exposure to deadly threats without suffering catastrophic mortality rates. That is what makes them so puzzling, Vraxos admitted. Human lifespans average approximately 80 of their years, comparable to many other sentient species. They do die from environmental hazards, certainly. But they also recover from injuries that should be fatal. Their bodies possess healing capabilities that our medical specialists are still struggling to understand. He brought up new images on the display: medical scans, survival statistics, documentation of human endurance. They can survive the loss of significant amounts of blood. They can recover from bone fractures without permanent disability. Their immune systems wage constant warfare against microscopic invaders that would overwhelm most other species. They require sleep, during which they are completely vulnerable for approximately 1/3 of every day, yet they have not been eliminated despite this massive weakness. High Counselor Matraxis leaned forward in her seat, her tentacles curling with interest. Commander Vraxos, you said your assessment of this species is ongoing. What is your preliminary conclusion? Vraxos was silent for several seconds before responding. High Counselor, in 2,000 years of Deathworld assessment, the Korath have developed a classification system that accurately predicts which species can survive which environments. We have never encountered a species that defies this classification. And the humans? The humans should not exist. The words fell from Vraxos's mouth like stones dropping into still water. According to every model we possess, no sentient species should be able to evolve on a world like Earth. The environmental pressures are too varied, too unpredictable, too severe. A species developing intelligence requires stability. It requires protected environments where large brains can develop over millions of years without being immediately killed by the surrounding world. He turned to face the assembly directly, his 6 eyes sweeping across the gathered delegates. Yet here they are, thriving, multiplying, and now reaching out into space. Our preliminary assessment is that Earth represents a death world category we have never previously encountered, and the humans represent something new in our understanding of galactic biology. What will the Korath do with this information? Ambassador Kellish asked. We will conduct a direct assessment, Vraxos replied. A team of our finest survival specialists will travel to the Sol system and establish contact with the humans. We will evaluate their capabilities firsthand and determine exactly what this species represents. The decision seemed to satisfy most of the assembled delegates. The Korath had been conducting such assessments for millennia. Their methods were proven, their conclusions reliable. But as Commander Vraxos left the assembly hall, his scales remained that troubled shade of yellow. In 2,000 years, the Korath had never failed to predict how a species would perform in hostile environments. They had never met a species that survived conditions they themselves could not. The humans were about to change everything the Korath believed about survival. 3 months later, a Korath assessment vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. On board were 12 of the Empire's most accomplished survival specialists, led by Senior Assessor Tharnak. They had colonized worlds of fire and ice, worlds of poison and radiation. They had survived environments that killed 90% of all life forms. They were completely unprepared for what they were about to encounter. The first sign that something was unusual came when their long-range sensors detected human activity on the 4th planet from the star. Mars, the humans called it, a world of thin atmosphere, extreme cold, and intense radiation. Assessor, we are detecting artificial structures on the Martian surface, the sensor operator reported. Multiple habitats, extensive mining operations, what appears to be a terraform initiative in early stages. Tharnak studied the readings with his 6 eyes. This world is hostile, cold, irradiated, nearly airless. What protective technologies are they using? The operator ran additional scans. Standard pressure habitats with radiation shielding, nothing exceptional by galactic standards. Then they are confined to their shelters. As expected, the humans may have survived their homeworld, but they clearly require protection from other hostile environments. But as the Korath vessel continued deeper into the system, they discovered that the humans on Mars were not confined to their shelters at all. Camera footage from human broadcasts showed suited figures walking across the Martian surface, driving vehicles through the red dust, even performing what appeared to be recreational activities outside their habitats. They go outside, the sensor operator said, his voice barely above a whisper. They know this world can kill them, and they go outside anyway. Perhaps they are simply foolish, Tharnak suggested, though his scales betrayed his uncertainty. A species that takes unnecessary risks does not survive long. With respect, Senior Assessor, they have survived. For millions of years on a death world far more dangerous than this one. Tharnak had no response to that observation. 2 days later, the Korath vessel established orbit around Earth itself. What they saw confirmed every disturbing detail from Commander Vraxos's report to the Assembly. The planet was beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Vast oceans teemed with life, including predators that could swallow a Korath whole. Mountain ranges thrust up from the surface like jagged teeth. Deserts stretched across entire continents, baking under relentless sunlight. And everywhere, in every environment, the humans lived and worked and played. They build their cities in earthquake zones, the analyst muttered, reviewing geographical data. This place called Japan experiences thousands of seismic events each year, yet they have one of the highest population densities on the planet. And here, another analyst added, a region called Florida. It is struck by massive atmospheric storms every year, storms powerful enough to destroy entire settlements. The humans rebuild and stay. The mountain ranges are the most disturbing, a third voice joined in. They climb them. For entertainment, the highest peak on this world has killed hundreds of humans who attempted to reach its summit, and still they come, year after year, risking death for the privilege of standing on top of a rock. Senior Assessor Tharnak listened to his team's reports with growing unease. He had spent 2 centuries assessing species and environments across the galaxy. He had always approached his work with scientific detachment, evaluating capabilities and limitations without emotional involvement. But these humans were different. They did not simply survive their death world. They embraced it. They sought out its dangers rather than avoiding them. They treated mortal threats as challenges to be overcome rather than hazards to be feared. Open a communication channel, Tharnak ordered finally. It is time we met these humans directly. The response to their hailing signal came within minutes. A human face appeared on the Korath view screen, smiling in what their databases indicated was a gesture of friendliness. Welcome to Sol System, the human said. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Command. We've been expecting you. They had been expecting them. Of course they had. A species that survived by treating every danger as a known variable would not be caught off guard by approaching spacecraft. I am Senior Assessor Tharnak of the Korath Empire, he replied formally. We come to assess your species' survival capabilities as part of standard galactic protocols. Captain Chen's smile widened. Wonderful. We've been looking forward to this. Would you like to come down to the surface? I promise we'll show you some things that will really test those assessment models of yours. There was something in her voice. Confidence, certainly. But something else, too. Something that took Tharnak several moments to identify. It was eagerness. The humans were eager to be tested, eager to show what they could survive, eager to prove themselves against the galaxy's supposed masters of Deathworld colonization. For the first time in 2 centuries, Senior Assessor Tharnak felt something he had never experienced in his professional career. He felt uncertain about the outcome of an assessment. The Korath shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere with Senior Assessor Tharnak gripping the armrests of his seat so tightly that the metal began to bend beneath his fingers. Outside the viewports, flames licked at the hull as atmospheric friction heated the air to temperatures that would have destroyed most spacecraft. "Your shuttle does not have enhanced thermal shielding," Captain Chen's voice came through the communication system, casual and unconcerned. "Don't worry, this is normal. Every spacecraft entering our atmosphere goes through this. We call it re-entry heating." Normal. The humans called traveling through a wall of fire normal. Beside Tharnak, assessment specialist Kornax watched the flames with all 6 of his eyes wide open. They do this deliberately? They designed their spacecraft to survive burning? The alternative was not reaching space at all, Chen replied. Our atmosphere is thick enough to generate significant friction. We had to engineer around the problem. Engineer around the problem. As if punching through a barrier of fire was merely a minor inconvenience to be solved rather than an absolute obstacle to space travel. The flames eventually subsided, replaced by blue sky and white clouds as the shuttle dropped through the lower atmosphere. Below them, Tharnak could see the landing site that the humans had prepared. It appeared to be a large open area surrounded by buildings, located near one of the planet's massive coastlines. "We're bringing you down at Kennedy Space Center in Florida," Chen explained. "This is where our early space program launched its first missions to other worlds. It seemed appropriate." The shuttle touched down with barely a bump, and the hatch cycled open. Tharnak was immediately struck by the wall of sensation that assaulted his senses. Heat, humidity so thick it felt like walking into liquid. The air itself seemed to press against his scales like a physical weight. "Welcome to Earth," Chen said, striding down the shuttle's ramp with the easy confidence of someone who found this environment completely comfortable. "How are you finding our atmosphere?" Tharnak ran a quick check of his internal diagnostics. "The oxygen content is dangerously high. I can feel it accelerating my metabolic processes, and the humidity is approaching levels that would promote bacterial growth in most species." "Yeah, summer in Florida will do that. We should probably get you inside before you experience a hurricane." "A hurricane?" Chen pointed toward the horizon, where dark clouds were beginning to gather. "Big spinning storm. Winds up to 300 kilometers per hour. They form over warm ocean water and tend to hit this coastline pretty regularly during this season. We've got about 6 hours before that one makes landfall. 300-kilometer winds. Regular occurrence." And the humans had built one of their most important facilities directly in the path of such storms. "Why would you construct anything in a location with such predictable destructive weather patterns?" Kornax asked, voicing the question that Tharnak himself was struggling to articulate. Chen shrugged. "Flat terrain, proximity to the ocean for booster recovery, and the location near the equator gives us extra velocity from Earth's rotation when launching spacecraft. The hurricanes are just something we deal with. Something they dealt with. Like a minor scheduling conflict rather than a civilization-ending threat." The assessment team was led to a large facility where a welcoming committee had assembled. Humans of various sizes and skin colorations stood waiting, dressed in a mix of formal attire and more practical clothing. One of them stepped forward, a tall male with graying hair and lines around his eyes that Tharnak's database indicated were signs of advanced age. "Senior Assessor Tharnak, I'm Director Morrison, head of Earth's First Contact Committee. We're honored to host the first official Korath delegation to our world." Tharnak inclined his head in the traditional Korath gesture of acknowledgement. "Director Morrison, My team is here to conduct a standard survival assessment of your species. We will need to observe humans in various environmental conditions and stress situations." Morrison nodded. "Captain Chen briefed us. We've prepared an itinerary that should give you a comprehensive overview of human capabilities. Though I should warn you, some of our assessment team members were very enthusiastic about designing the program. They may have included a few activities that are somewhat extreme." "Extreme by what standard?" Morrison exchanged a look with Chen that Tharnak could not quite interpret. "By human standards, Senior Assessor. Which means they should be very informative for your assessment." Over the following days, the Korath team was subjected to a methodical demonstration of human survival capabilities that left even their most experienced specialists struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. They visited a training facility in the Nevada desert, where the temperature exceeded 45 degrees Celsius in the shade. Human soldiers ran obstacle courses, carried heavy equipment, and engaged in combat exercises, while the Korath observers retreated to climate-controlled vehicles to prevent heat damage to their modified physiology. "How long can they maintain this activity?" Tharnak asked one of the human trainers. "Most of our troops can operate effectively in this heat for 8 to 10 hours with proper hydration. Special Forces units train to extend that significantly." "And if they run out of water?" The trainer's expression grew serious. "Then survival time drops dramatically. Humans can last about 3 days without water in moderate conditions. In this heat, maybe 24 hours at best. But we've had survivors found after longer periods. The human will to live can push our bodies past what should be biological limits." Will to live. The Korath had always considered survival to be a matter of physical capability, genetic modification, and technological enhancement. The concept of willpower as a survival mechanism was foreign to their understanding. From the desert, the team traveled to Alaska, where temperatures dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Here, they observed humans living in conditions that should have killed them within hours of exposure. But the humans had adapted. They built shelters from ice. They hunted animals whose meat sustained them through months of darkness. They found ways to thrive in an environment that offered nothing but cold and death. "Your species lives here by choice?" Kornax asked a local guide, his voice betraying his disbelief. The guide, a weathered woman named Elena, laughed at the question. "My family has lived here for generations. We love it. The summer days that never end, the northern lights in winter, the wilderness that goes on forever. This is home. But the conditions are lethal. Only if you're not prepared. And we're always prepared." Preparation. Another concept that the Korath had underestimated. They prepared for hostile environments through genetic modification and technological shields. Humans prepared through knowledge, experience, and cultural adaptation passed down through countless generations. The assessment continued with visits to earthquake zones, volcanic regions, and coastal areas prone to devastating floods. In each location, the Korath found thriving human populations who had learned to live alongside dangers that would have driven most species to extinction. But the most disturbing revelation came when the team visited a hospital in Houston. "This facility specializes in trauma medicine," their guide explained, a surgeon named Dr. Amara Washington. "We receive patients from across the region who have suffered severe injuries." "What types of injuries?" Tharnak asked, his analytical mind already cataloging possibilities. "Everything. Car accidents, industrial mishaps, gunshot wounds, falls from height, animal attacks, and today we have a somewhat unusual case I thought your team might find interesting." She led them to a recovery ward where a young human male lay in a bed surrounded by monitoring equipment. His body was covered in healing wounds, and one of his arms ended in a bandaged stump below the elbow. "This is Jake," Dr. Washington said. 3 weeks ago, he was hiking in the mountains when he fell into a crevasse. His arm was crushed beneath a boulder, trapping him. He was alone, with no way to call for help. Tharnak studied the human with growing curiosity. How was he rescued? He wasn't rescued. He rescued himself. Dr. Washington's voice carried a mix of professional admiration and something deeper. After 48 hours trapped in that crevasse with a crushed arm, Jake made a decision. He used his pocket knife to amputate his own arm below the point of injury. Then he climbed out of the crevasse, hiked 8 kilometers to the nearest road, and flagged down a passing vehicle. The Korath team stood in stunned silence. Self-amputation. Solo extraction from a hostile environment. 8 kilometers of hiking after massive blood loss and traumatic injury. This should have killed him, Kornax finally managed. Should have, yes, Dr. Washington agreed. But Jake decided he wasn't ready to die. Human determination can override a lot of biological limitations. Jake himself smiled weakly at the alien visitors. Wasn't ready to quit, he said, his voice still rough from recovery. Had too much to live for. Too much to live for. The Korath extended their lifespans through genetic engineering. They avoided death through superior technology and modified physiology. They had never encountered a species that simply refused to die because they found existence too valuable to surrender. As the assessment weeks turned into months, Tharnak found his carefully constructed models of survival capability being demolished one observation at a time. Everything he thought he knew about hostile environments and the species that conquered them was being rewritten by a civilization that had no right to exist according to Korath science. The breaking point came during a demonstration of human recreational activities. This is called free climbing, Captain Chen explained as they watched a human ascending a sheer cliff face without any safety equipment. The goal is to reach the top using only your hands and feet. No ropes, no protection. If she falls? Tharnak asked, unable to tear his eyes from the figure moving impossibly upward against the vertical stone. Then she dies. That's part of why people do it. They risk death deliberately? For entertainment? Chen nodded. Humans have always sought out danger. We ski down mountains at 100 kilometers per hour. We jump out of aircraft and fall through the sky before deploying parachutes. We swim with sharks and climb into cages to observe predators up close. Some of us believe that life without risk is not really living at all. The climber reached the top of the cliff and raised her arms in triumph. Even from the ground, Tharnak could see the joy on her face. She had challenged death and won, and the victory seemed to fill her with a vitality that no amount of safety could have provided. I need to contact Commander Vraxos, Tharnak said quietly. Our assessment protocols are inadequate for this species. 3 days later, Tharnak stood in the communication chamber of the Korath vessel, facing a holographic projection of Commander Vraxos. The commander's scales were cycling through colors that indicated deep concern and confusion. Your preliminary findings are impossible, Vraxos said after reviewing Tharnak's report. You describe a species that actively seeks out danger, that survives injuries through force of will, that treats Deathworld conditions as normal existence. This contradicts everything we understand about evolutionary biology. I witnessed it personally, Commander. Multiple times, across multiple environments. The humans are not simply survivors. They are something else entirely. What then? What classification would you give them? Tharnak hesitated. He had spent months struggling with this question, and he still did not have a satisfying answer. The closest analogy I can offer is that humans are pursuit predators who have extended their predatory instincts to encompass their entire relationship with existence. They do not flee from danger. They chase it. They hunt challenges the way other species hunt food. That is not a survival strategy. That is a death wish. It should be. But somehow it works for them. Their willingness to face death seems to give them power over it. They have developed medicine, technology, and social structures specifically designed to help them survive the consequences of their risk-taking. They lose individuals, certainly, but the species as a whole grows stronger with each challenge overcome. Vraxos was silent for a long moment. What is your recommendation? I recommend that the Korath Empire immediately revise all assessment protocols to account for human capabilities. I further recommend that we approach any interaction with this species with extreme caution. You believe they pose a threat? Tharnak considered the question carefully before responding. I believe that any species capable of surviving what humans have survived and choosing to seek out more danger rather than less is capable of anything. If they decide that the galaxy itself is a challenge to be conquered, I am not certain that any force could stop them. The holographic image flickered as Vraxos processed this assessment. We have been the masters of Deathworld colonization for 2,000 years. Are you telling me that these humans have surpassed us without even trying? I am telling you that the humans were born masters. They did not need to modify their genetics or develop advanced technology to survive hostile environments. They evolved that capability naturally, on a world that should have killed them millions of times over. What the Korath achieved through 2,000 years of engineering, the humans accomplished through nothing more than stubborn refusal to die. Vraxos's scales settled into a deep gray color that Tharnak had never seen before. It took him a moment to identify the emotion it represented, because it was not one that Korath commanders typically displayed. It was humility. Return to Korath Prime with your complete findings, Vraxos ordered finally. The assembly must be informed. And Tharnak, I want you to bring some humans with you. Let the rest of the galaxy see for themselves what we have encountered. I believe they will come willingly, Commander. In fact, I suspect they have been waiting for an invitation. When Tharnak approached Captain Chen with the request, her response confirmed his suspicion. We were hoping you'd ask, she said, her smile containing that same unsettling eagerness he had noticed during their first communication. A chance to visit alien worlds and prove ourselves against galactic challenges. You couldn't keep us away if you tried. Tharnak felt his scales shift to colors he could not quite identify. He was beginning to understand something important about this strange species, something that changed everything about how the galaxy would function from this point forward. The humans were not just survivors. They were conquerors who had never been given an empire to conquer. They were explorers who had been trapped in a single star system. They were hunters who had run out of prey. And now, thanks to the Korath assessment, they were about to be unleashed on a galaxy that had absolutely no idea what was coming. The Galactic Assembly had never seen anything quite like the arrival of the human delegation. Typically, new species brought before the assembly were ushered in with careful protocols, surrounded by diplomatic handlers, and given extensive briefings on proper behavior and expectations. The humans had rejected all of these arrangements. Captain Sarah Chen led her team of 12 through the massive doors of the assembly hall as if she owned the building. They walked with a confidence that the assembled delegates found simultaneously impressive and alarming. These beings from a death world that should not support life moved like they belonged among the stars, like the galaxy itself was just another frontier waiting to be explored. Commander Vraxos stood at the central platform, his scales cycling through colors that betrayed his uncertainty despite his best efforts at composure. Senior Assessor Tharnak had returned with not only his findings but also these human specimens, and the preliminary reports had sent shockwaves through the Korath command structure. Now the rest of the galaxy would learn what the Korath had discovered. Members of the Galactic Assembly, Vraxos began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. I present to you the newest species to make contact with galactic civilization. They call themselves humans, and they originate from the third planet of the Sol system, in the Outer Rim territories. High Counselor Matraxis leaned forward in her seat, her tentacles curling with interest. We have read Senior Assessor Tharnak's preliminary report. The claims made within are extraordinary. Before we proceed, perhaps the humans themselves could address the assembly? Vraxos gestured toward Captain Chen, who stepped forward to the central speaking position without hesitation. She looked up at the tiered seating arrangements, her single pair of eyes somehow managing to convey the impression that she was meeting the gaze of every delegate simultaneously. "Thank you, High Counselor. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm honored to represent humanity before this assembly. I understand that our existence has raised some questions among your species, particularly regarding how we survived on what you apparently classify as an extreme death world." A murmur rippled through the delegates. The human's tone was respectful but not deferential. She spoke to them as equals. Not as a primitive species seeking acceptance from superior civilizations. "I want to address those questions directly," Chen continued. "Yes, our planet is dangerous. Yes, it has tried to kill us in countless ways throughout our evolutionary history. Volcanoes, earthquakes, ice ages, asteroid impacts, diseases, predators, and our own violent tendencies have all taken their toll. But here we are, not just surviving but thriving, and now reaching out to take our place among the stars." Representative Golmack of the Fortress Worlds raised a manipulator arm. "Captain Chen, the assessment report indicates that humans deliberately seek out dangerous situations for recreational purposes. Surely this cannot be accurate." Chen smiled, an expression that several delegates found unsettling given its display of teeth. "Oh, it's accurate. We climb mountains because they exist. We explore deep oceans despite the pressure and the predators. We developed the concept of extreme sports specifically to push our limits in environments that could easily kill us. Risk is not something we avoid. It's something we embrace." "Why?" The question came from Ambassador Kellish of the Thermian Collective, her small form barely visible in her diplomatic pod. "What possible evolutionary advantage could come from seeking death?" "We don't seek death, Ambassador. We seek life. There's a difference." Chen paused, gathering her thoughts. "On Earth, safety was never guaranteed. Our ancestors who hid from every danger failed to explore new territories, find new food sources, or develop new technologies. The humans who took risks, who pushed boundaries, who faced fear and overcame it, those were the ones who advanced our species. Over millions of years, risk-taking became encoded in our very nature." She gestured to the other members of her team, who had spread out across the speaking floor behind her. "Every human in this room has faced death at some point in their life. Some of us have faced it many times, and every time we chose to fight, to struggle, to refuse to give up until the last possible moment and sometimes beyond it. That's not a death wish. That's a love of life so strong that we refuse to let anything take it from us without a fight." The assembly hall fell silent as the delegates processed this philosophy. For species that had evolved in safer environments, the concept was almost impossible to grasp. They preserved life by avoiding danger. The humans preserved life by confronting danger and defeating it. High Counselor Matraxus spoke again. "The Korath have long been considered the galaxy's masters of Deathworld colonization. Their assessment protocols have guided expansion for 2,000 years. Senior Assessor Tharnak, what is your official evaluation of human survival capabilities compared to Korath standards?" Tharnak rose from his position among the Korath delegation, his scales settling into the formal gray of official testimony. "High Counselor, members of the Assembly, I have spent 2 centuries conducting survival assessments. I have evaluated over 300 species across more than 1,000 hostile environments. In all that time, I have never encountered anything like humans." He manipulated the central holographic display, bringing up comparative data. By every measurable standard, the Korath should be superior survivors. We are larger, stronger, more durable. We have modified our genetics to resist temperature extremes, radiation, and toxic atmospheres. We have developed technologies that allow us to colonize worlds that would kill unmodified Korath within hours. The display showed side-by-side comparisons of Korath and human physiology. Humans possess none of these advantages. They are smaller, weaker, and more fragile. They have no natural armor, no redundant organ systems, no enhanced healing capabilities. By all rights, they should have been extinct millions of years ago. Tharnak paused, letting the weight of his next words settle over the assembly. Yet they are here, and in my professional assessment, they would outperform Korath survivors in almost any extended survival scenario. A wave of shock rolled through the delegates. The Korath, admitting inferiority, it was unprecedented. "How is this possible?" demanded a delegate from the Crystalline Collective, their voice resonating through their communication apparatus. "You said yourself that humans lack physical advantages." "Physical advantages are only part of the survival equation," Tharnak replied. "What humans possess, what makes them truly exceptional, is psychological resilience of a type I have never before encountered. They refuse to accept defeat. They refuse to acknowledge impossible odds. They possess a capacity for hope in hopeless situations that borders on the delusional, and somehow that delusion becomes reality." He brought up records from his assessment, videos and data logs from the months spent on Earth. "I watched a human survive the loss of a limb through self-amputation and walk 8 kilometers to safety. I watched humans run through desert heat that was damaging my own modified physiology. I watched them climb vertical rock faces with no protection, swim with predators that could kill them instantly, and voluntarily subject themselves to conditions that should have destroyed them. And they did all of this not because they had to, but because they chose to. That choice, that willingness to face death and fight anyway, is something that no amount of genetic modification can replicate. It is the core of what makes humans unique." The assembly erupted in overlapping conversations, delegates conferring with their aides and each other. The implications of Tharnak's assessment were staggering. If the Korath acknowledged human superiority in survival, it fundamentally changed the balance of power within the galactic community. Captain Chen remained calm throughout the commotion, watching the alien delegates with an expression of patient amusement. When the noise finally subsided, she spoke again. "I think there's something important that's being overlooked in this discussion. You're all focused on our ability to survive dangerous environments. That's impressive, I suppose, but it's not what defines humanity." She stepped closer to the central platform, her presence somehow commanding attention despite her relatively small stature. "We don't just survive, we protect, we help. We sacrifice ourselves for others, even for strangers, even for beings from other species. That capacity for empathy and self-sacrifice is just as essential to our nature as our ability to endure hardship." High Counselor Matraxis tilted her head in the Velian expression of curiosity. "You speak of protecting others. Can you provide examples?" "Our history is full of them. Humans who threw themselves on explosive devices to shield their companions. Firefighters who entered burning buildings to rescue people they had never met. Doctors who traveled to disease outbreak zones knowing they might become infected themselves. We have countless words for this behavior: heroism, courage, nobility, self-sacrifice. They all describe the same fundamental impulse, putting the well-being of others above our own survival." One of the human team members stepped forward, a man whose body bore visible scars and whose right arm ended in a prosthetic device. "My name is Marcus Williams. I was a rescue diver before joining this delegation. 3 years ago, there was an accident at an underwater research station. 17 people trapped in a flooding habitat with limited oxygen." The assembly listened in silence as Marcus continued. "The structure was unstable. The water was full of debris and currents that could crush a diver against the walls. Every rescue specialist was told the risk was too high. Going in would likely mean death." "What did you do?" Ambassador Kellish asked softly. "I went in. 12 times. Brought out 14 people before the structure collapsed. Marcus touched his prosthetic arm. Lost this on the last trip. A beam came down and I had to cut myself free. But I got those 14 people out. They're alive today because I decided their lives were worth more than my arm. Absolute silence filled the assembly hall. The concept of deliberately sacrificing part of oneself to save strangers was fundamentally alien to most species present. Self-preservation was the primary directive of evolution. What the humans described seemed to contradict the very laws of nature. "This makes no biological sense," Representative Golmack finally said. "Natural selection should eliminate individuals who sacrifice themselves for non-relatives. Your genes would not propagate." Captain Chen nodded. "You're right, from a purely genetic perspective. But humans don't operate on purely genetic programming. We have something else. We call it culture. Ideas and values that pass from generation to generation, shaping behavior in ways that transcend biological imperatives. The idea that we should help others, that we should protect the weak, that we should stand against injustice even at personal cost. These concepts have become part of what it means to be human." She spread her arms, encompassing the entire assembly in her gesture. "This is what we offer to the galaxy. Not just survival skills, though we have those. Not just adaptability, though we have that too. We offer the human spirit, the willingness to face impossible odds for noble causes, the capacity to care for beings beyond our own species, the determination to make the universe a better place, one act of courage at a time." High Counselor Matraxis rose from her seat, a gesture that indicated she was about to make an official pronouncement. The entire assembly fell silent. "In all my years serving this body, I have never witnessed testimony quite like what we have heard today. The Korath assessment, combined with the humans' own demonstration of their values, paints a picture of a species unlike any previously encountered." She turned to face Commander Vraxos. "Commander, you brought the humans before this assembly. What is the official Korath position on their membership in the galactic community?" Vraxos's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a deep blue that represented solemn commitment. "The Korath Empire formally recommends immediate provisional membership for humanity in the Galactic Assembly. Furthermore, we recommend that humans be granted full access to our Deathworld assessment protocols and databases. Their perspective on survival would be invaluable to future colonization efforts." The statement sent another wave of shock through the delegates. The Korath had never shared their assessment protocols with any other species. Their survival expertise had been a closely guarded secret for 2 millennia. "You would share your knowledge with these newcomers?" asked a delegate from the Archives Collective. "Knowledge that took your species 2,000 years to develop?" "We would share it because we have finally encountered a species from whom we can learn," Vraxos replied. "The humans have survived conditions that would challenge even Korath specialists. Their methods are different from ours, but they are effective, perhaps more effective than our own. It would be foolish to let pride prevent us from learning from them." Captain Chen stepped forward again, this time addressing Commander Vraxos directly. "On behalf of humanity, I accept your offer, and I want you to know that sharing goes both ways. Everything we know about survival, about adaptation, about the human techniques that have kept us alive on our death world, we'll share freely with any species that wants to learn." "Why?" Vraxos asked. "Knowledge is power. Why would you give it away?" "Because that's who we are," Chen replied simply. "We survived our planet by working together. Tribes sharing hunting techniques, civilizations sharing agricultural knowledge, scientists sharing discoveries that benefited all of humanity. Cooperation and sharing are just as essential to our nature as our individual toughness. We don't hoard advantages. We spread them, because a galaxy where everyone is stronger is a safer galaxy for all of us." The vote that followed was unprecedented in assembly history. Normally, new species faced years of evaluation before being granted even provisional membership. The humans received full provisional status within a single session, with only a handful of abstentions and no votes against. As the delegation prepared to leave the assembly hall, High Counselor Matraxis approached Captain Chen personally. "I have witnessed many first contact events," Matraxis said. "Never have I seen a species make such an immediate impression. Your people are remarkable, Captain." Chen smiled. "We're just humans, High Counselor. We do what we've always done. Face challenges, help each other, and refuse to give up. It's worked pretty well for us so far." "The galaxy has changed today," Matraxis observed. "I wonder if any of us truly understand how much." "Change isn't something to fear," Chen replied. "It's something to embrace. That's another human philosophy. Growth requires change, and growth is what life is all about." As the human delegation departed, escorted by Senior Assessor Tharnak and a Korath honor guard, the assembly delegates remained in animated discussion. The universe had just become larger and stranger than any of them had imagined. A species from an impossible world had arrived among them, carrying values and capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about survival and society. In the corridors outside the assembly hall, Tharnak walked beside Captain Chen, his scales showing colors that the human had learned to associate with deep contemplation. "You impressed them," he said finally. "Even the species that initially seemed hostile were won over by the end." "We weren't trying to impress anyone," Chen replied. "We were just being ourselves." "That may be the most impressive thing of all." Tharnak paused at a viewport overlooking the station's observation deck, where stars glittered against the endless black of space. "For 2,000 years, the Korath believed we understood what it meant to master hostile environments. We thought survival was about physical capability and technological enhancement. And now? Now I understand that survival is about spirit, about refusing to accept limitations, about caring for others even at personal cost." His scales shifted to a warm amber color that Chen had never seen before. "Humans have taught us that being strong enough to survive is not as important as being good enough to deserve survival." Chen placed her hand on the massive alien's arm, a gesture of friendship that transcended species barriers. "We've got a lot to learn from each other, Senior Assessor. Your people have explored more of the galaxy than we could have imagined. Our people have explored the limits of what's possible on a single world. Together we might accomplish things that neither species could achieve alone." Tharnak's 6 eyes focused on the human with an intensity that spoke of new understanding. The galaxy feared what humans might become when they reached the stars. Conquerors, destroyers, a threat to established order. And now? Now I believe the galaxy should hope that humans become exactly what you promised today. Protectors, helpers, a species that makes the universe better simply by being part of it. He turned back to the stars, his voice thoughtful. "We Korath boasted that we could master any death world in the galaxy. We were proud of our achievements, our strength, our superiority." "Pride isn't always a bad thing," Chen offered. "No. But we have learned that true mastery is not about conquering environments. It is about nurturing life wherever it is found. The humans understood this instinctively. It took encountering your species to teach us a lesson we should have learned millennia ago." The human delegation eventually departed for their own vessel, carrying with them provisional membership in the Galactic Assembly and the beginning of a relationship that would reshape civilization across 1,000 worlds. Behind them, they left a galaxy that would never be quite the same. The Korath had boasted they could master Deathworlds. They had built an empire on that claim, conquered environments that killed other species, and considered themselves the ultimate survivors. Then they encountered humans, and the universe learned that there are some things more powerful than strength, more durable than modified genetics, more essential than advanced technology. There is the human spirit. It cannot be quantified, cannot be engineered, cannot be replicated through any process known to galactic science. It simply exists, burning bright in every human heart, driving them forward into the unknown, refusing to surrender no matter how impossible the odds. The death world of Earth had not created a species of mere survivors. It had forged something far more remarkable. It had created a species of dreamers and protectors, of warriors and healers, of beings who looked at the vast darkness of space and saw not an enemy to be feared, but a frontier to be explored. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in recorded history, the future seemed brighter than anyone had dared to imagine, because humanity had arrived among the stars, and they had brought their hope with them.